All right. So, welcome to Wake Up to Your Life Magic, a podcast that is dedicated to having conversations that elevate our leadership and specifically really focused on the business world and our leadership there. And today I have with me Scott McAllister, an executive coach who is doing some similar work in this space and is excited to share his story and his views on the world to make it a better one. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Helmut. Really appreciate you having me today, my friend.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. There's so many great things that you've done in your life experience as a leader. Now you're as an executive coach. Tell us a little bit about what you do and who you help and serve.
Yeah, so I work with senior executives. I help them to navigate through large change and transformation for their career, which could mean a big new executive job, a big promotion, leading a big transformational program, which is I did a lot of those in my own career, as well as those folks that are hitting a point of their career where what used to fulfill them just isn't lighting them up anymore and trying to figure out what's next, but aren't sure what that is and help people to navigate through that. So I like to say that I help prepare people for the boardroom, but also get in touch with their soul. So there's the professional work, but there's some of the deeper work that can unlock for them both professional success, but also great fulfillment in their life.
Yeah, I love that. As you mentioned that, I think about that as you grow up, when you're going to grow out, you kind of go, wait, who am I now? What do I want to be when I grow up? Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. Now, I want, for those that are listening in, a lot of people, we're in the corporate world and we're looking for the things that are going to encourage us, excite us, elevate our vision for what we're doing. And so our first question on the show is always around your story, right, Scott? We want to know about Scott. We want to know about perhaps a defining moment for you, something in your story that really changed you or shaped you that you'd like to share with our audience.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about my transition and pivot out of the corporate world into becoming an executive coach. Just didn't, as you'll hear, didn't happen just overnight, but it was a big transformation for me. So I spent 30 years as a senior executive, companies like American Express, Dell, Time Inc., Comcast. I was always a marketing and customer experience leader in figuring how to leverage digital and data to transform companies and drive greater outcomes. And I hit a point, Comcast was one of my final destinations from a corporate perspective, had great success in transforming for the cable division, their customer experiences, moving them off just the phones and into the digital side of the business, whether it be app, the online platform, and saved over $300 million for the company over 3 years. And as happens in corporate worlds, new senior executive came in, new senior leader. She decided to change out some of the leadership program. 3 of her 4 direct reports. One of those was my boss that ran the digital side, which impacted my role. And at the time, we had moved down to Philadelphia for a few years. And I like to tell the joke that my life's a little bit like my movie, the movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and I'm not the Greek. So my wife was actually very much anxious to get back to family in the New York City area. And I was like, you know what, this is fine. Timing is good. We can get back up the New York City area from Philadelphia. And I just done a big digital transformation program that I knew many companies were looking for this work. And that was October of 19. And fast forward to March of 20 and COVID hits, and that does wonders for your executive job search. And I would say a couple things. One is, as I was going through that work at Comcast, it was a big transformation program, a lot of influence without ownership. And quite frankly, it got a bit exhausting at times, challenging, but exhausting. And there were times where I was like, is this really what I want to keep doing? Wasn't 100% sure. Did I want to think about something different? And then it also had for a couple of years just feeling like something was missing and I could never put my finger on it. I didn't know whether it was professional, personal, or whatnot. And I'll tell you, when COVID hit and the job opportunities really dried up at that point, nobody's looking for a senior executive. Everybody was retrenching, surviving. It forced me to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of self work and figuring out, well, what is it I really want to do? So one of the nice things was, and I remember my HR guy, when he showed me my package, saying, listen, we got you the Rolls Royce of executive coaches to help you through this process. And I just been hit with the package. So I was a little bit cynical of that, but I did have a phenomenal executive coach that runs executive coaching for Challenger Gray and Christmas, which is one of the large outsourcing shops. And she works with CEOs all the time, not just on job transition, but in bigger imperatives for corporations and acquisitions and so on and so forth. And I started picking her brain. She was a former Goldman Sachs executive. And how did you get into coaching? How did this happen? And she started to encourage me, like, I could see you doing this, and made some introductions to some folks that worked for her, like Challenger Gray and Christmas, some folks that were at Amazon and other large companies that made the transition. And I was like, wow, this seems like phenomenal. I always loved being a leader in the corporate environment. I always loved working with a team. I had a phrase that was, once you're part of the McAllister family, you're always part of the McAllister family. So always looking after people long after they left me and stayed in touch. And so that coaching angle was a big part of what I enjoyed. And so I brought this brilliant idea to my wife, and it kind of went over like a fart in church, to be quite frank. She was like, are you out of your mind? We've got 4 kids, we got colleges. Like, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I think in her mind too, when she thought of coaches, she was thinking of Instagram and 20-year-olds posting about life-changing and whatnot. And didn't necessarily see this as a true career that it is. And I said, you know what? She's right. I've got at least another 1 or 2 in me of big corporate roles, make sure we get the kids through college, so on and so forth, and went back to the corporate environment. And quite frankly, that next experience, I just didn't have the passion anymore. It was a challenging business environment. And about 9 months into it, I realized, I said, you know what, this is the universe telling me that there's something else. I could choose to keep doing this and not feel fulfilled, or I can pivot to where my passion is, so really have an impact on people and changing their lives. And so I told my wife and got her buy-in that, listen, I'll ride this one out. And when this role ends, I'm going to go and start my coaching business, which 9 months later, after I think it was my 4th transition of leaders, that's when it happened. We agreed to disagree, took a package, left the organization, went to coaching school within 2 weeks, started my coaching school experience, and launched my business about a month later, which it'll be almost 2 years on Labor Day, right after Labor Day, that I launched the business. And I just haven't looked back, man. I love what I do. I love being able to impact these executives, both professionally and in their personal lives, so they're more fulfilled. Always love to tell them I will help solve what it is you bring to me, which is always a professional challenge. But if you haven't transformed into a better person through the process, I'm not doing my job. So there's just something about working in your flow that it doesn't feel like work anymore, and having that impact on others really just fills my cup. And so I found my calling, and really love what I do.
I'm so glad for that. I will say, it's so two thoughts from that. One is the pandemic, right? So any of you all are listening, we all went through things in the pandemic that I think are still playing out today, right? The world stopped and we all started asking ourselves questions. And I think that a lot of us came out saying we want something deeper, more meaningful, purposeful. And so the second thought I had about that is, our challenge and your challenge, if you're listening, if you're in the corporate world, is how do you shape and make your world in corporate full of passion and purpose, right? Because we're all feeling this sense of like, I want to do something meaningful with my work. And if you don't feel that in your corporate job, you're either going to leave it or you're one of the leaders that gets to make that job, make that environment one that people are on fire for. And so I know your work, my work, Scott, is really focused on helping leaders to do that in the corporate environment. The second question that I like to ask is really looking at your vision. So Scott, as we think about, I want people to get inspired by the fact there are other people out there that are striving for something. What kind of world are you trying to form or create, or do you see that you're really looking to achieve in the work that you do?
Yeah, I think there's a core thesis that I have that informs kind of my approach to the way that I coach, and that is that we are living in an ever-changing world that that change is accelerating. And it is with AI, geopolitics, so on and so forth. And it is creating chaos. It is creating challenge. Each of our leaders are, because of stress, what happens in stress response? We go to default behavior. Default behavior is never our best behavior. And it almost creates like a scrum of bad behavior amongst many of the executives. And I think one of the ways to solve for that is for leaders to stay rooted in their leadership, in their vision, in their values. And so I'll talk a lot about the North Star approach and focus of helping people understand what's their North Star. And for leaders, it's not just what's their North Star, but what is the North Star that they're passionate about, but they know they can get others passionate about as well, right? That I think that if we reflect on our corporate careers, we've been in some big successful organizations. The places where we did best, we usually had a leader that inspired us, right? And helped us to see something bigger than ourselves, and felt we were having an impact that had some sort of importance. And so helping people to craft that vision, I think, is really critical, but also being rooted in their values. So what are the values I hold that helps them to make decisions of, is this in alignment with my values? Is it not? It also helps me decide how I want to show up every single day. And then also helping them understand what are their core strengths so that they understand where they can get that lever point, that leverage in the work that they do. And also where they don't have strengths, how do they bring in the right people in to surround them to be more successful? And in having that, I've got a methodology called the CVI Method, which is all about clarity, vision, and then plan for impact. That clarity step is all about getting rooted and grounded so you can set the vision that you get inspired by and impassioned by. And then the impact portion is putting a plan together that will actually help make that real. And given my 30 years as a corporate executive, I've presented to the board in the boardroom. I've walked the hallways. I know how the politics work. I know how transformation and change gets done in these places. So helping be that sounding board and that advisor that can help people, executives, to successfully make it through and drive the outcomes that are important in the face of all that chaos and stress. Bringing calmness, being a more rooted perspective and clarity. I think that's the core of what I want to do. And the outcome from that is it's a little bit of a butterfly effect. If I'm coaching a senior leader and they are more rooted, right, and they got a clear vision, that has a butterfly effect on the people that work for them, the people around them. And so it's kind of setting impulses, think almost like the stone that goes into the water and sends the ripples. It's a little bit of that as coaches. And in certain cases, my individual clients, executives will hire me to then coach their team around that same transformation and change. And then that ripple becomes bigger. And my ultimate vision is to do things like writing books and being out and speaking, which I do, to help to inspire, to have broader impact, to continue to send those ripples out.
No, that's awesome. And let me say that it's going to be great lead to my secret question, which is my favorite question on the show. So Wake Up to Your Life Magic, right, is a book calling for spiritual awakening, right? Calling basically that in the world of AI, in the world of tech and our ability to replace humans for tasks that we don't really love to do, right? Like we don't necessarily love working in a shipping yard. Great, get a machine to do it. The most important element of our humanity is what you kind of refer to, this North Star, this spiritual purpose, this why am I here on earth? What is the purpose of business, right? But to love one another. Originally, right, we use it to love. We then use it to conquest and fight over values, right? But it's truly having common values or a common belief in let's just call it a unifying belief in love, right? That every faith, everything that's moving us forward, whatever your name for it is trying to move our experience here forward, right? In love for one another. And it's kind of like the last part of the closet we don't get out of, right? So I can talk about, being Germanic, or I can talk about being African. I can talk about, where I'm from. I can talk about my orientation, but our spirituality, we leave in the closet when it's the root. You refer to it, Scott, right? What are you rooted in? What are your values from, right? It's such an important part of business. So my question to you, my favorite question, is just what's your take on spirituality in the workplace, and how do you feel like it evolves into leadership and leading teams in a corporate setting?
Yeah, I think that faith is an important element for a leader of what do they believe in? What is their faith system? I'm a Christian, personally, Greek Orthodox. I converted over after I married my wife. And that sets a lot of my value system and what's important, and things like generosity for others and showing up in a positive way. And to use your word, to use love, which is interesting because that word is like a trigger in the corporate environment of like, it's almost like it's a negative thing. But if we think of it in words like empathy or caring or generosity, those are all just words that come down from love. I would argue that if people are showing up true to their faith, they're going to show up in that love that you just described. Unfortunately, I've also seen where there is no root in any faith, or at least the way that people are showing up is not demonstrating that generosity, that empathy, that caring. The opposite of that would be toxicity and seeing people show up where they're self-focused, they're not worrying about others, and they're not concerned about the impact that they're having in the space. If you're showing up from that faith core where there's a vision, you're rooted in your values, and you're doing this out of care for others while you're going through it, I think it's another butterfly effect in that environment. I know that you and we had a talk before this where it went a bit deeper of, well, how would you think at a more macro level of how businesses work? Because right now it's about shareholder value, shareholder value, shareholder value. And the closest representation that I can think of, and I don't know if I thought of it from the faith piece, but the word love works for me, is Patagonia. It is a love for our earth. It is a love for nature and outdoors, and everything they do is an expression of that love, right? Sustainability, the products that they give, like they're still selling, their products are so well constructed that when people are done with them, they want them to bring them back so they can sell them to other people, so the sustainability keeps there. And the irony is, look at how well the organization has performed. It's rooted in that love and clarity, and the vision is so clear on why they're doing things that anybody that's working there knows that. And I think Ben and Jerry's ice cream is another. They sold to Unilever years ago, but I think still stay true to their root around caring and fun and sustainability and working with real farmers and allowing people to be who they are in that fun. Like that, again, when somebody is able to show up as their true selves, authenticity is a very important thing. That's one of my values. And I'm an Enneagram 3. If you're familiar with the Enneagram 3s tend to be very achievement oriented, and they're chameleons to be successful. And I'm a reformed Enneagram 3 that's showing up in authenticity. If we can show up truly authentic and doing things that are in our flow, will be so much more impactful and more powerful. And I think a place like a Patagonia or a Ben and Jerry's, because they are so rooted in the way they are, they attract people that can be in their authenticity, who can then be in abundance. And when you are in abundance and you are in your flow, you can't help but be impactful, and good things in abundance come back accordingly.
Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. A couple of thoughts that, move to the B Corp, right? The B Corp is the model they have. There are other ways when we think about, I believe that this is going to emerge. It has to emerge. Like the earth is screaming for us to emerge a model in which we think about, are more places going private, or are we looking at funds that are doing the work, right? Like if I put my money in this fund, I know that I'm contributing, right, to the kinds of companies that value the things I value, which include, paying employees well, and also think about the outcomes for your clients, right? Just because I can sell you something doesn't mean it's necessarily good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this faith element, we get scared about it because we've been so like, let's not talk about it. But I can tell you right now that when I knew my leader had a faith basis that was all embracing, right? So you couldn't be like a Christian that doesn't love other people. It had to be like a Christian that loves others. Then I was excited because I knew that person, what they worked out of, and I could bring questions that were deeper to that leader. And I worked harder for those leaders, and I trusted them more. Because I could have hard conversations, with them about moral issues, because we see them all the time at work, right? And it made me feel safe. And I will say that was true for Hindu leaders or Christian leaders. It didn't matter, what the faith was. What mattered was that they made it safe to have a conversation about why we were really at work,
Yes. No, I agree.
Yeah. So I think it's a fascinating question, and one that I think we're going to continue to ask ourselves as we want to be more authentic. We want to be more open at work, and how do we break open that last box? That box, so we can have that conversation in a room and know that we're supported by others around us. So love that topic. Let's talk about challenges, Scott. So, a lot of us, if you're in corporate, we like to, we look polished. We're always together, right? Because we want to be the brand. And the reality is, every corporation, often you go in, right? And I always say, right, like the grass looks greener, and then you get there and there's always poop in the yard, right? You're like, hey, I'm at the next place. Look at this. It never changed, right? Any place you went, it was, and sometimes they hit it really well. So in this part, I like to just talk about vulnerability, right? So as you're doing this work, Scott, what do you see as one of your greatest challenges to be successful presently that you're working on? It's just a way of being vulnerable with those that are listening.
Yeah, I think for me, it is continually being comfortable with. I'm now a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, which for most of my career I was a big corporate person, and then there was a paycheck that came every 2 weeks, and I'm having to build a business. I'm almost 2 years in this, but in full honesty, I think any honest executive coach would tell you it takes 3 to 5 years to build this business, and not every day is easy, right? There's some hustle involved. There's some blood, sweat, and tears. I think what keeps me going is the core of it, as I've mentioned, like this is so aligned with my values. And it's work that I do that I feel like I'm really in the flow, in the, use Gay Hendricks' phrase from The Big Leap, the zone of genius, not meaning I'm a genius, but where you are able to function in your flow. The work you're doing doesn't feel like it's really that much effort. Even though you're putting in the effort, makes life easy. And that gives me the balance that I need as I'm building this business and still figuring it out, and kind of what I knew, 3 months into this journey versus a year into this journey versus 2 years into this journey is so different. And I think one of the other things I would share, I spent 30 years in corporate America, and I went to undergrad for business. I started with GE. I went to grad school at North Carolina Chapel Hill, and I went to Dell, and like I built that over 30 years. And then I get into coaching, and like 3 months in, I want to be a 30-year coach. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You've got to go through the experiences. And here's the reality. There's a really famous coach named Rich Lifton that wrote a book called The Prosperous Coach. And he'll challenge people like, well, I'm a new coach. It's like, no, you aren't. Like, you were 30 years as a leader in corporate America where you were coaching people all the time. But having this is what I do for a living, and that's all I do, is new. And there's also different skills that we learn when you go through a coaching program like I did, that pull different levers than what we do in a corporate environment, where you're able to work with somebody and help shift their mindset out of the analytic mindset into the creative mindset, the right brain, to work with them somatically, to remove some of the blocks, the saboteurs that come and get in the way. It's some of that deeper work. And quite frankly, that's the stuff with executives that they can get very uncomfortable with. But the folks that I work with that get comfortable with the uncomfortable, those are the ones that have the real breakthroughs.
Yeah, you're totally right. And what I really appreciate, so I want to kind of step back for our listeners and observe something that I think is encouraging about AI and about what we're all going to go through in a sense. So the traditional model, it's so funny that both you and I did the GE time, like our GE years. How many years were you there?
4.
Okay, I was 10.
Oh, wow. There's a GE meatball under that shirt.
Oh yeah, I used to walk in, and sometimes the hospital administrators make fun of me. And they're like, "Where's your meatball imprinted?" um, yeah, long story. But what I want to know is that, this step from I'm going to call it corporate. It can be a factory, it can be military, right? Places where there's a model, right, and we're all sort of following the leader. Into solopreneur, it's kind of what AI is going to beg of all of us, right? All of a sudden, setting up your own business isn't so hard. You can get a couple apps and you can really automate a lot of things. Um, and I want you all listening to recognize that we all grew up in it was a Prussian-developed Western model of education with a teacher in front of you, desks and chairs, and we obeyed. And the Prussians developed that when they lost to Napoleon because it created great factory workers, great corporate leaders, right? And we emulate that. When we step out of the matrix, we have to learn a whole other model. I call it, I teach a creator being model, but you're the source, right? And so what, Scott, you were getting to, right? We have to go through this process of breaking all these beliefs that you can't, because you're the salesman, you're the provider, you're the support team, you're everything, right?
Yep.
And back in the day, you were a fisherman. You would get up, go fish, and you would do the whole thing. You'd sell it, you promote it, right? It was the way everyone was. And sometimes you were together in a business, and we get to be more like that. It's almost like we got to go back and find that in ourselves, connect with a belief that you are enough, right? And you can do it. So it's almost like a flip of a script back to an old way of being.
It's interesting, right? So if you think about some of the transformations that have happened, when we went to a cloud-based system, suddenly the bandwidth and the amount of storage and processing power that was necessary to be able to do a startup changed and was accessible to a much broader audience. It created an explosion of startups and new types of businesses. And now we're moving to, with AI, everyone has a full staff of AI agentic tools and LLM models where they can scale. As a person of one, you now have like a staff of 20 working for you with that AI piece. And you're right, we're going to move through a period where there's going to be tremendous change, transformation, loss of jobs, corporate jobs, big jobs through productivity. But it's going to open up the opportunity for an explosion. We already have seen small businesses are the largest place of growth in the United States economy, right? Of where businesses are growing. That is going to explode, I would say, 10 to 20 fold with these new tools. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this transformation occurs. I mean, every day is going to be new. I have 4 kids, and I tell each of them, adapt and really embrace AI, adapt or die, because those that are the Luddites that aren't willing to adapt and start to use are going to be left behind. In the short term, at least, those that know how to leverage these tools to help them be more efficient and productive, and whether it be solopreneur or even in the roles that they do, those are the people that are going to survive and, quite frankly, thrive. There's much bigger systematic societal issues. We're not going to touch that one today, that are forthcoming, and I don't think anybody is ready for. But I think there's great opportunity in front of us as well.
Yeah, I actually think, to echo that, I think what you're with your kids as well, and with mine, it's like, you realize entrepreneurship is the other model, right? It's you can do it yourself. And AI begs us to teach our children that they are capable, right? That you are enough, and you can be creative. To your other point on the bigger, broader things, I think, I'm running for mayor of Atlanta. But a part of that, I would strongly suggest that it's kind of the same issue we're talking about. If we're not being spiritual beings at work and able to talk openly about values, if that's not happening in government and in society, we're also not doing what we need to do there, right? Because these are moral questions. With the explosion of AI, what are we going to do in the human tribe? How are we going to treat one another? It's the question of our times, right? Which is why I'm asking us to all wake up, because our lives matter. And the way you as a listener feel about these topics, and how you're actually choosing every day to pursue a world that you want to live in, we're all creating it together. There's no one, we're not, no one can be like, well, it's not me. I just, there's no victims here. We're all part of the soup.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So as part of the soup, Scott, what I love is that you have this beautiful history. And I'd like you to close us out with sharing a gem, something that you learned along the way that you wish someone would have told you earlier, that really helped you, and that you would like to kind of share as a gift to our listeners that want some inspiration.
Yeah, I think one of them is, I did do a tremendous amount of transformational work and innovation, product building, experience building, so on and so forth. And the interesting thing I always found, and this is one of the elements of my coaching practice I always try to bring to leaders, the work is hard, like building the thing or creating the experience or whatever it may be. But that's not actually the hard part. The hard part is bringing people along for the change.
Mm.
It's how do I understand who are my influencers, both formal and informal? How do I bring them along for the change? How do I set a vision I can inspire people by? How do I put the right team in place to help me get there? How do I communicate what's going on as I'm going through that process so everybody's in the loop and feeling part of it? And that's what gets lost. I hear a lot of times people in that middle of the career that'll say, like, I'm not getting promoted and doing all the right things. I'm having all this impact. And I'm pretty clearly hearing they're not worried about it's not just what you do, it's also the how you do it, how you bring people along, and are people even aware? Like when a tree falls in the forest, if no one's there, does it make a sound? You have to make people aware of what you're doing. It's the same thing in transformational work. So knowing that that's a process, and actually that's part of my the CVI method for my clients, is helping them to have a clear process through that clarity, the vision, and then the programmatic piece of planning your impact to make that occur. Because the work, though hard, is not the hard part.
Yeah, it's so funny. Part of that, I thought of that. You got to toot your own horn, right? So it was. I always remember that. I actually particularly learned that at GE because we both have that experience. But I learned like you kind of have to say, "Hey, I've got an idea. Who likes you?" There's an enrolling process, right? And then there's a visibility, like because to your point, the tree falls and no one knows. Like, what's the point? That's great advice, though. I think a lot of young people don't realize that that's part of it. There's this whole people side to success. That's really great wisdom. So thank you, Scott. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having
Appreciate
me
your
on.
time. Absolutely. I want to thank you all as listeners. Remind you, check me out on wakeuptoyourlifemagic.com. You can learn more about the book and do your part. Ask yourself, where do you need to wake up to make the world that we will be proud of, we'll be proud to hand our kids, and that our ancestors lived for. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.